All right, welcome back. Tim Buckley joins me again for our second half hour. We were going to kick it off with some questions here, Tim, and I'll let you read this first one. This is a great question. We talked a little bit about this yesterday, but we got a young, aspiring meteorologist who has a really good question for us tonight.
All right, so Cade is in the third grade. He loves studying the weather, wants to know more about the hurricane hunters. Will they give a lot of different information, like maybe more snow or more ice? And also, how long does it take for the hurricane hunters info to get included into the models? This is a great question, and it's something that we just saw go into real action the last couple of days when they were flying into this storm over in California or off the coast, like we were saying. That data was into the models just within a couple of hours. I believe they got it into what we would call the 0Z runs, which is the nighttime versions of the computer models, and so it happens pretty quickly. It doesn't take a long time for them to get that where it needs to go, which I thought was pretty impressive.
Yeah. So Tim, I didn't know if they were flying today, so I just looked. There's actually 3 planes flying right now. One is flying over the Gulf, sampling the Gulf down to the south. So let me show you. I'm going to pull up a website, Tropical Tidbits. I'm not going to give anything away. So there's the plane from San Francisco. Looks like it's flying back across the country. So that's the plane that flew yesterday. It's coming back to Keesler. But you can see there is a flight right now in progress that is flying off the coast of California. It's doing some drop-ons, at least 2 in that storm. But here's the interesting one, Tim. Look at this. There's one flying over the Gulf off of Tampa, and it's sampling the atmosphere to our south, which is probably an area I wish they would have sampled yesterday, because that will actually probably help quite a bit for our moisture transport, and more importantly, that warm nose. This is going to help us figure out that warm nose a little bit better. So 3 planes, 2 of them are doing drop-ons over water, one over the Gulf and one over the Pacific. And then what's happening with the one flying back from San Francisco, it's just going to take upper air measurements as it's flying. But 3 missions technically kind of going on, and that should be in the 0Z runs tonight, which are basically starting right now.
And I guess the follow-up to that would be, have they always done this? And if so, how long and how common, and how do they determine which one is worthy of putting the resources out to a winter storm mission?
Well, we're going to have to get a hurricane hunter on there. I know a couple of them online. Maybe we'll have to do that.
Yeah.
But I will tell you, I think they've done this occasionally. I know I remember even 20 years ago, a couple big nor'easters they've flown into, but it was kind of just like, hey, like a last minute thing, let's do this. But I think what's happened, Tim, and I know you saw this research too, they started flying missions on the West Coast for atmospheric rivers to help forecast those. So I'm kind of wondering if maybe they saw some use out of that and said, hey, why don't we task the hurricane hunters during the off season to help with bigger storms like that? And so maybe that's what they're doing now. And I think if they can prove that this works, this might become a more normal thing, especially for bigger systems like we're seeing here.
Yeah, it's super helpful when the storm is in a data poor area like an ocean. You only have so much to go off of, and with all the struggles of the computer models, and we need better forecasts and all these things, we would welcome all the better data that we can get. And so it's encouraging to see that they're doing this, especially for a storm that's going to impact basically, broad brush, a third of the country's population at minimum, it seems.
Yeah. I'm going to look and see. The 0Z is not running now, but I'm going to look and see if it made it into the models tonight. There's actually a site where you can see added data that goes in. And last night's run, there was like 25 drops on. So far, I haven't seen anything go into today. But that's a great question. Thanks, Cade. That was an awesome question. Jeb, what's our next question? Let's see this one. How long do you think it will be until the roads are drivable again, given the cold temperatures on Monday and Tuesday? Wow. That is actually a really good question, Tim. We alluded to it a little bit. The cold air behind it, I think drivable is definitely a subjective question because some of us will probably say it's got to be bone dry. Other people I can drive with a little bit. But I think the problem here is the sun helps, right? Sun is our best snow and ice removal we have in the South. The problem is the sun only lasts so long, and we've got these cold overnight temperatures. we're probably going to see a lot of thawing and refreezing every day, which means black ice and slick spots probably every morning. Wouldn't you say for maybe the rest of the week?
I think so. I think it'll take all week, and I wouldn't even guarantee it'll all be gone by the end of the week because of how cold it is. I mean, we could be in my area below freezing basically through Wednesday, and that's daytime too. So it's going to be difficult. But like you said, it depends on what you consider drivable. It also depends on what roads you're talking about, because we have two types of roads in the Carolinas. We have roads that get plowed, and we have roads that never get plowed. And I think those neighborhood streets that just they don't get attention because it's not part of the plan or the budget, they're going to still probably be glacierized until Thursday, Friday, maybe next Saturday or so. So just kind of be mentally prepared for that and consider that when planning, because you're going to need to get out of the house at some point. So maybe you have to park somewhere else or rely on a friend or something, but you got to consider that plan ahead of time, I would say.
Yeah, I think that's, I think, as you mentioned it, and I don't feel like that bad saying this. I think there's going to be a lot of school cancellations and delays next week, especially considering some of the minor events that have caused that. I can't imagine what this week will look like. What's our next question, Jeb? We'll let Tim read this one.
Hello there. With the potential for power outages, when you say we could be without power for days, does that include Charlotte, mostly rural areas? Would Charlotte have better access to help with the outages? It's also a great question. I know we've heard from Duke Energy a little bit the last couple of days. They're certainly aware of the storm. They plan for these things. So the question, obviously, Charlotte is subject to power outages. Everywhere within whoever's seeing us right now, basically subject to power outages. I don't think that the crews are going to be able to fix a lot of them in short order. I mean, if you have 1 million people without power, it's going to take several days to fix. And unfortunately, even if there's 1 million people without power, someone's lights are going to get turned on first. But there's also going to be someone whose lights are turned on last. And that might take until the end of the week. So I think you should probably be prepared for that as well, that we could still have customers that are waiting by the end of next week as well.
Yeah, and just to reiterate that, Tim, Jeb, can you show the winter storm warning and watch graphic again? I think this will help explain what I'm going to say here. There are only so many crews to fix power lines in the whole country, right? Typically, if there's a hurricane, everybody goes there. If there's a big ice storm, they all go there. When a storm stretches from Texas to New England and there's a bunch of ice in between, I heard this on a call today when I was with the emergency managers. The one concern they had was how thin the crews were going to be spread out over such a big area. So to Tim's point, I agree with you, Tim. I think because of the expanse of this storm and the ice, just not the snow, the ice, it might take a little bit longer. And as you know, when you're trying to remove trees as well as fix power lines, that slows everything down. So I don't think it matters if you're rural, urban. If there's an outage, it could be a while. And that's why you're hearing not only us, but the Weather Service, the governor, emergency managers say you need to be prepared for the power to be out, not for a day, but for days. And I think that's good advice, Tim.
Yeah, hopefully we can get some help from crews, to our south in Florida or something. Or a lot of the storms in the north, and this might sound silly to us here, a lot of the storms in the north, they don't cause a ton of power outages most often, unless they're involving ice. So if you get a foot of snow or whatever in Ohio, you're probably not losing a lot of power there with that. No. So you can still get crews to come down and help, but they have to help Mississippi, and they have to help Alabama, and they have to help Tennessee. So we're on the list. It's just going to be a big need, I would say.
Yeah, I've even seen crews come down from Quebec and eastern Canada to come help the United States when we have big ice storms. So that's pretty common as well. I know Duke's all over it. I'm kind of curious to see how their healing power, they have a way to redirect power now, and they buried lines. So I'm kind of curious to see how quickly they restore, because technology has changed a lot since the last big storm we've had here.
they call it that self-healing technology,
Yeah.
and it reroutes the path of the power to your house, which is pretty cool and very smart. So it'll be interesting. I don't know that we've had a big storm in the area since they've enabled that, but we've done a bunch of stories about that, which is pretty interesting to see.
All right. Yeah, that's a great question, though. Here's our next question. This one is, why do some forecasts predict Boone in the high country with some of the worst ice, while others, like yours, show less ice? I think this is geared towards me. What factors are driving that forecast difference? I think I answered this question online as well. I had a very similar question because I think a lot of folks are seeing like just strict model output. And as we talked about, Tim, some of the raw QPF converted directly to ice is kind of not really accurate. But I will also say this, and I mentioned this in my my comments online, I'm still thinking a quarter inch of ice in parts of the mountains, which is more than enough to cause damage. So I think we're splitting hairs sometimes when it says, hey, is it a quarter or a half an inch or 6/10? Pretty much anything above a quarter is going to cause some damage. But I will say this, Tim, too. I do think in the mountains, I do think more mixing is going to occur early on, which could keep the freezing rain totals lower and not until the very end of the storm.
I mean, just from my point of view, I would say my forecast confidence level when it comes to predicting the weather up in Boone versus the weather here in the Piedmont, not totally my wheelhouse, so it's not always where I'm focusing most of my attention. It's also not really in our area that we cover all the time, but there are so many other factors, and a lot of times up that way you might have a ton of ice accretion or accumulation on one side of the mountain, more so on the other side.
Yes.
So it is going to be a lot more locally driven up that way, and so specifically, we do this with snow forecasts too, but I would say when it comes to ice forecasts, there is a lot of uncertainty.
Yeah.
And kind of at the end of the day, what you need to know is we have the chance of bad ice.
Yeah.
And that would include Boone. It would basically include the whole area. So prepare for that. No one's going to be upset if you don't get the bad ice.
Yeah.
But I think all of us should prepare for that and probably not focus on, I've seen some maps, even from the Weather Service, they put these out to the decimal point, to the hundredths of an inch.
We're not that good.
Let's just kind of round things.
Yeah.
Impacts here. Are you
Yeah.
going to get minor ice or moderate? I think most of us are expecting moderate ice, and some areas could get major.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of the splitting of the hairs.
Yeah, if it needs a higher total for you to get ready for this, then put it as high as you want because it's a high impact
Yeah,
event.
get ready.
When I hear people say that, it's like I always say it's enough to cause significant damage. So that's all you really need to know. It's going to be enough to cause damage. I really say anywhere in our viewing areas, Tim, probably should be prepared for damaging ice and hope that it doesn't happen. I think that's the best advice we could give everybody.
I think so too. I am still concerned. I don't know if you'll agree or disagree. I am still concerned that folks might not be taking it super seriously, and I
Yes.
think it's because that those snowfall total numbers we're not giving you that right
Yeah.
now. You would like me to give you a map that says you're getting a foot of snow, and then
Yeah.
you'd probably buy more bread, which is crazy because this might have a bigger impact, or probably will have
Yeah.
a bigger impact to our lives, and a longer lasting one as well. Now, at the same time, though, I have seen the pictures of the grocery store, and they look bare too. So maybe there are two types of people. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I there's a term called snow blindness, Tim, and it has to do with bright sun and snow and not being able to see. I think there's another term that we could use snow blindness for. It's when we talk about forecasts, people get blinded by just the snowfall totals, and they disregard all the other information. And it's difficult. I guess the best way to equate it would be like during hurricane season, where people hyper-focus on just the center of the storm, and they forget like the whole storm causes damage, not just the middle. And sometimes you'll hear people, if the center doesn't go over their location, like, it's going to miss us. And it's like, no, now you're on the east side of the storm. That's the worst part to be in. And it's almost like with this storm. Yeah, the snow shifted north, but now that puts us on like the east side of a hurricane. It's the worst part. We're going to get ice.
Yeah. Or they're only focusing on the wind speed and they forget about the rain. And, there's so many comparisons that are good ones here. But all of you should know, and you probably do because you're weather fans watching, it's going to be a bad storm. It's just not going to be a fun one. And that's what we've said all week. I told our news team on Monday, let's call this a winter storm. Let's not call it a snowstorm. And that was back when either was still possible. But we have so many winter threats around here that you need to consider that.
Oh gosh, Tim, we're spending too much time together. We think alike, because we literally put out a push notification on Monday that said weekend snowstorm, and I cringed and I go, "Don't call this a snowstorm, call this a winter storm," because that's what it is. And yeah, I appreciate that. So our next question, very good question here, Tim. I'll let you read this one.
Is there any area to the west that you keep an eye on as an indicator of what we may experience? This is a really nice question.
Good question.
And I think there's some folklore that goes along with this, right? I'll probably let Brad take that part, but I will say, when it comes to whatever type of snow, winter it is, snowstorm or ice storm, I always like to see what's going on in the south. There was a storm a couple of years ago that I was kind of brushing off a little bit, and then it started snowing in Texas really well. It started snowing in Mississippi really well. I knew at that point that I was cooked, and I needed to adjust because that thing was overperforming. So those are trends that you can observe. Nashville would be another example. But Brad, is there something to this that if it snows in Atlanta, it's going to snow in Charlotte?
So I've heard this since the day I got here, Tim, and as a scientist, I try to be unbiased, and I go, you know what? I'm going to look at the data. And so one of my first blogs I did early on, I went back and looked at all the snow events in each city, and I couldn't find a correlation. And the biggest correlation I could tell you why this doesn't work, we average like twice as much snow and ice than Atlanta. So they're definitely, probably more snow here than Atlanta means there's a lot of events where it never happens down there. But I do think where this comes from, like most folklore, there's a grain of truth to it. It's just misinterpreted. Big storms that come from the southwest affect the entire southeast, kind of like this storm. And people tend to remember the big ones that affected both Atlanta and Charlotte, and they tend to forget the ones that just impacted us. So I think that's what happens. It's kind of one of those things, because I think of the biggest storm in my time here, 2004, we had 2 feet of snow in Charlotte, and you go past Greenville, South Carolina, there wasn't a flake on the ground. It was just here. So there are events like that where it doesn't happen in both cities. And that's the best way to find a correlation. We should average the exact same amount of snow if there is a correlation to that. And there just isn't. We're like twice as much as them.
But maybe to answer the question another way, though, is like, if we are wanting to watch what's happening with the storm, which we do like to do, hey, let's look at Atlanta or Birmingham, or let's look at their forecast, and then let's look at what's happening. So comparing their expectation, is it doing more or doing less?
Yes.
Those are things that can be helpful to us, because it might signal that we've been working off of some bad data and that we need to adjust in real time. So that's something we watch.
I even said that yesterday, Tim. I'm like, I was hoping for the snow to start in Texas and Oklahoma and see what it does, because that would give us a really good cue on what the storm is doing compared to guidance. I think that's a really good key. This is a great question we just got, and I actually called out a national report we did on this today. Sorry, NBC. Are the trees in my house going to explode? Tim, I don't know if you saw this. One TikToker or YouTuber put out a crazy graphic in the upper Midwest, circled an area, said tree explosion area, and it's ridiculous, first of all, but it is based on something that does happen occasionally. It's called tree cracking, okay? And this happens early in the season up north, and really the Northwoods, Minnesota, upper Midwest, even the Great Lakes and Michigan, we had this. The first Arctic outbreak of the season, when the trees are just starting to go dormant, the sap can freeze quickly, and you can get cracking of the bark. It'll make noise, but they don't explode. It's just a cracking sound, and it doesn't happen in the south because we just don't get that cold, and the trees are now in January, everything's dormant, so there's not moving sap for this to really happen. But it's a weird question. Have you gotten this at all?
It's funny. I haven't gotten this question, but my co-anchor here, he's a Wisconsin guy, and he still follows the weather up there. Whenever you move from the north to the south, you still follow that weather. You always want to know.
So you know how good you got it.
And so he was telling me they got a minus 50 wind chill in the Northwoods or something the other day. But in any case, his friend Luke Sampe, who's a meteorologist up that way, he was just doing a fact check on this thing. about the trees popping. I never heard of it before.
Yeah.
And it just sounds very silly. So
Yeah.
don't worry about that, but our trees could come down for another reason.
Yeah, trees will explode here because of weight of ice, not because they're getting too cold.
Yeah, those pine trees.
All right, Jeb, we got another good question in there. No flight questions. That's no. This is a question I've gotten a lot. What is the best time to apply salt or ice melt? Because I don't like to waste this stuff, because there's not a lot going around right now, and you just don't want to throw this out unless you need it. I tend to wait until the ice actually forms so you know where to put it. I mean, to me, that makes the most sense. But if you want to pre-treat, just do it lightly. Don't go crazy with it right away. But what do you think, Tim? When's the best time to do that? Before a storm or during a storm, or do you wait till after the storm?
Well, I'll tell you what, if you wait until the whole thing is over and you have a pretty sizable sheet of ice, you got to use a lot of that stuff to kind of
That's
get
true.
after it. So, I mean, if the ice is that thick, you're not going to melt it very easily
Good
with
luck.
those products. So
Yeah.
I would say maybe something in the middle.
Yeah.
I do tend to put a little sprinkling down. It's always going to make you feel good that you're doing something as
Yeah.
well. But, maybe during the event is a good choice.
Yeah.
And probably wait until it starts to change over to freezing rain. That sleet is not going to accumulate super easily on you. So you might wait until that icing starts. And like Brad said, the ice might not accumulate to everything in sight.
Yeah.
The driveway might be a little harder than the deck, for example, or
Sure.
think about surfaces that you use the most and kind of prioritize those. Brad, you put a cool video out on your Instagram I saw today, though, of just a lot of helpful tips. Things like the tarps could help you out as well. Those were good ideas, and now I've got to do a lot of laundry because you said that we should wash all of our clothes.
Yeah, because a lot of folks wait to the weekend to do their laundry, and it's like, this might not be the weekend to wait. Get it done, because you might not have power to do it, and then you'd want to keep those clothes for warming. Yeah, I was saying, because my son was trying to find ice melt, because he's a little entrepreneur. He was like trying to buy up as much as he could, because he's going to go out in the neighborhood and then treat people's yards or lawns and sidewalks for money.
Oh, good.
And but he couldn't find a lot. He only got like 4 or 5 things of it. And I said, well, because it's hard to find, just tell people, especially for like steps, just cover them with the tarp or blanket, and then when the ice is done, you can pull it up and they're totally clean. So it works for your car as well, by the way. It's a cheap and easy way to do it. So we got a great question here, Tim, and I know we both can answer this, but this is something that many people may not know about. We talked about the hurricane hunters. The question is, do commercial aircraft capture the kind of upper air data that would feed into models? If so, do they? If not, why not? And I'll answer this simply, and I'll let you go on, Tim, is yes, they do. The data for every airplane that takes off and lands feeds data into our models. So we do use that. In fact, I've seen chasers, when chasing in the planes, use a nearby plane to get a quick profile of the atmosphere taking off so they can kind of forecast where to chase a tornado. So this is very useful information.
It's very useful information. It's not exactly the same as the hurricane hunters, which are literally launching stuff into the atmosphere and letting it drop through the whole column and everything.
Yeah.
But yes, these are real observations that we can get daily. And we actually have a little bit of an experiment with this. If you'll remember that thing called COVID that happened a couple of years ago, there was a dramatic decrease, if not a halt, I don't remember, but there was a big decrease anyway about airline travel. People weren't flying as much, and so there weren't as many flights. And there was stipulation, or there was question at the time, let's see how that affects the weather models, because there were fewer observations going into the system. So we're actually able to test this, and I believe there was at least some degradation in skill. It's not the main thing that goes into them, but it is something of a piece to the puzzle.
Yeah, during COVID, it was primarily international travel. Remember, Tim, like traveling from Europe to the United States and Southeast Asia,
right.
because those planes are going over that data void of the ocean where we don't have a bunch of data. And if I remember the study over that year of COVID, I think they were degraded around 10 or 11% in accuracy. And Because if you think about if all the oceans aren't being covered by a lot of flights, that's the long wave pattern, we call it the troughs and ridges, would be slightly harder to forecast because we're not getting that upper air data. And if you've ever been in a plane, especially I fly Delta a lot, you can pull up the seat, the screen behind, and you can look at your flight information. It'll tell you the temperature, the dew point, and your wind speed outside in real time. It's kind of cool to watch that.
Yeah. Brad and I are probably the same people on the airplane that you're watching Netflix or whatever on the screen, and we've got the map. In fact, I saw a meme the other day on Twitter, and it was the guy. He's got the map on the seat screen, and then he's got his laptop up with a better flight tracker, and he's just like monitoring the situation.
I'm always amazed how cold it is out there. I'm like, oh my gosh, it's minus 47 degrees. It's like crazy cold outside, you know. Sometimes even colder. Yeah, that's really cool. So we've got another question here. Tim, I'll let you read this one. This is a good question, actually.
Okay, here we go. Is there any way that the warm nose will disappear, or at least could be a thinner nose, or a thinner zone at least? It's a great question.
Yeah.
And I think when we get to this point in the storm, we're thinking about what do we know that's locked in and what's a little more durable and what's a little less durable. I think at this point in time, and just knowing the Carolinas weather that we do, it's very rare that the level of warmth above our heads is underestimated, or sorry, it's very rare that it's overestimated.
Yeah.
Usually the models are underestimating how much warmth we have above our heads. Obviously, a couple days away, anything could change. But I would be floored if that warm nose shrunk a lot or went away. That would really surprise me. Just the trends that we watch, usually the cold air wedge is a little stronger than expected, and at the same time, that warmth above our heads is also a little stronger than expected. That's why a lot of our snow forecasts in the past have busted when you turn to sleet too early. It's a little rare to turn to sleet too late, in my experience.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question, and I think that's where the hurricane hunter down in the Gulf is going to help us out, because that's kind of the location the warm nose would be coming from. So I think it's going to give us a good hint at that. You're right, Tim. We have a lot of weather data from the surface. I mean, everyone's got a backyard weather station, airports, Doppler radars. We don't have a lot of information above our heads. We got to rely on the aircraft and the upper air data. So if there's going to be an air, it's going to be above our heads. And there is definitely some wiggle room, and that's probably the $1 million question, because that will be the difference between freezing rain and sleet. I don't think it goes away. I think the thickness is what we don't know, Tim, and the duration of that thickness, that will be the hardest part.
I think so too. I do have this graphic pulled up. I think I showed it yesterday, but Jeb, if you wanted to punch it up, it has two lines on here. So this is Sunday afternoon. It's not perfect. It doesn't line up exactly with the precip type, but it's good enough. That's going to be your 32-degree line in yellow above our heads, about 3,500 feet or so in the air. So that's where it's above freezing. I was actually looking at one of the computer models. It forecasts above Greensboro to be about 45 degrees Sunday afternoon. And we're going to be in the 20s here at the ground. And so that's just one model's opinion. But it's a dramatic warm nose. And if people don't even know what a warm nose is, that's just that level of warmth above our heads where it isn't usually. Typically the air cools as you go up with height. This is different in this type of situation.
Yeah, it's funny you say that, Tim. I was looking at BuffKit, which is a program I use to look at soundings, and I noticed that same thing, like up around 4,000 or 5,000 feet above Charlotte. It was like 10 degrees above 0 Celsius, which is super warm. And then about 400 or 500 feet above the ground, it was 10 degrees below Celsius. It was like this crazy cold air near the surface. I had just never had seen such a difference within 5,000 feet. And that's what makes this storm so unique, and also why we're so worried about it, because that means a lot of liquid is falling into cold, cold, cold air.
And it's harder to refreeze that warmer liquid into a sleet pellet if that's what you're trying to do too. So there's a lot to be concerned about for sure.
Yeah, so one last tip. We're almost out of time here. We're just going to give you the emergency supplies. You got time to prepare out there. The good news about the slower approach of this, Tim, is I think people that worked and don't have a lot of time to prepare today and tomorrow, You might have Saturday. If it's your day off, you will have the morning to go. Now, I would not go to Costco Saturday morning on a good day. I certainly would not do it this weekend because it is going to be crazy. So be safe out there, everybody. We'll have more coverage tomorrow, and there's more WCNC Plus coming up.